creatives, Lauren Elizabeth here with Lauren Elizabeth Animal Art. I hope you're having a lovely spring. I have a brand new series for you today, guys, that I think you're really gonna like. This is gonna be uplifting, inspiring, and fun. And it's called Color Courage, where I help you build that confidence and the courage to go all out in color in your acrylic, pet, or wildlife paintings. I'm going to begin this series by showing you my layering strategy for painting dark colored animals. Full black colored animals, dark brown animals, gray, furry or non-furry animals. This technique can be applied to a wide range of dark colored animals. All right, creatives, let's get to it. Now, to demonstrate this technique, I'll be using Jack the donkey. So once I apply at least a base layer to the background, I determine where that light source is. Where is it hitting the animal the strongest? So in this reference, it's from the upper right. There's light all over because this donkey is outside, but where it's the strongest is the upper right. From there, I then determine the more realistic colors. Okay, so right now I'm actually doing that with some light browns, a little hint of yellow, and grays around the muzzle. If you even want to saturate your reference photo to pull out some of those hints of color, you can do that. That has helped me in the past. I'm going to over exaggerate those hints, so that's why I added lots more yellow than what I'm seeing in the reference. And that's what I'm referring to when I say the more realistic colors, those are the colors I'm seeing in the reference, real life colors. Now, most often I like to begin more realistic in color and then move to more improvising and more creativity with those abstract colors. But most often, whenever I'm working with a dark colored animal, I like to use purples and blues. Yes, I like to add in pinks, oranges, turquoise, yellows, a lot of those colors to pull out and complement those blues and purples, but they don't come in till the middle and end. I'm gonna just focus on my dark, my medium, and light variations of purple and blue. Now, real quick, if you'd like to paint this wonky donkey in real time using acrylics, this is a beginner intermediate level tutorial. You can find this in the Pet Portrait Masterclass, along with similar realistic, colorful pet painting tutorials of cats, dogs, and other pets where I have the fundamental techniques spelled out so you can master these techniques and paint any cat or dog, and a variety of different pets too. The regular live paintings on Saturday mornings are a big hit. You don't want to miss the Easter one of a Brittany Spaniel I have planned coming up. So again, I have a link to the Pet Portrait Masterclass down below. Guys, let's get back to this donkey. Now, that can likely mean that I also pull in some of those more realistic colors in my blues and violets for my core colors. Those are the colors that I'm going to use, the primary color of the animal and the color that I pull and mix other colors with along the way throughout the process. So here's what I mean by that. So my dark value is going to be raw umber. It's a dark brown with phalocine and blue. That's blue. My medium value is going to be an indigo with a little bit of violet and lots of phalocine and blue and a bit of white. And just slightly lighter in value for the light value in this instance, because we're going dark here because we're working with dark brown, I mixed up violet with white. All these are really strong dominant colors, more on the dark side because we're working with a dark animal. Now you can see I pulled in some raw sienna mixed with my violet and a bit of raw umber. So that is where I'm getting a bit more abstract in the areas that I'm seeing the light hit the strongest. It's still medium in value, even though that's where the light is hitting it the strongest, because it's a dark animal. And because it's our first base layer, it's the bottom darkest layer. We want to lean more on the dark side than go too light too soon. I think that's what really trips artists up, is they just go too light too quickly, but then it just starts to look like a light colored animal, because when you're adding those pops of color at the top layers, everything else is similar in value. Okay, so just be patient with gradually adding a little bit more white or your lighter color to each layer as you stack them from bottom to top. Now, in this early ugly phase, you're going to be doing lots of guessing on value. You're going to be testing out colors that you mixed If it's too dark, you lighten it up. If it's too light, you darken it up. They're primarily using the blending technique, so thankfully while it's wet, you can adjust the value. And because of that, colors will likely get a little muddy, but that's okay. A lot of this layer is gonna be covered up. We still wanna see the bottom layer as we add those smaller dabs and lines over top. We don't wanna entirely cover this layer up, but this is our base. This is like a rough draft. We're just mapping out where we think the approximate value sits. Now, where that light source is hitting the donkey the strongest, I know I'm going to be adding really abstract colors there. I plan to add some light turquoise. I plan to add some light lavender. So even in this base color, while it's wet, I am blending in some oranges and some yellows, only on the sides that are facing the light source. That's where I'm really going to focus a lot of those abstract, beautiful, vivid colors. So the darkest areas, I'm going to stick to more browns and blues and purples. It's the light source side that I'll really get creative with my yellows, with my oranges, with the turquoise and pinks. Now, Masterclass students know by now that I love the cat's tongue brush. It is great for covering some large areas and also creating the beginnings of fur texture. If you're using this brush, and by the way, I'm using the Arteza size 8 cat's tongue brush, it will make your life so much easier. You're more efficient, especially with this base layer where you are trying to cover up the white, but at the same time, getting the direction of the fur right. I'm working in rows to do some overlapping and blending so I can get those abstract colors in, and also where there's just slight differences in value where it gets a bit darker around the musculature and the bone structure of the donkey's jaw. I want to have gaps of color where it's just purple. I want to have gaps of color where it's a little bit of blue, a little bit more brown. I am intentionally trying to get a range of colors based on where the dark, medium, and light values are. So what I mean by that is I won't just use one shade of purple for all the light values, or one shade of blue for all the medium values, or one shade of blue for the dark values, whatnot. That's why this process is so fun, it's so freeing, because it's really not that strict. You can just be inspired to whatever color you choose, as long as it's the correct value. All right, so we've added at least one layer to the entire animal. In some areas there's 2, 3. Here is where we're gonna go in with our smaller brushes, not our smallest brushes. I don't recommend the finest detail brushes, but somewhere in between. So I'm using my size 1 Arteza round brush in the variety pack, and using a medium value from my core colors that I mixed up, I'm going in and applying texture, that line after line with very small gaps in between. It's just a little bit more detail on the fur texture. I want to have the correct direction, I want to have the correct length, and a width that's not super thin, but also not too thick and clumpy. Now, the type of fur the animal has will obviously change this technique. I'm working with a medium length, straight fur animal, and so my brush strokes are going to be straight. I'm only going to add the slightest curl to the hair sticking up vertically on the back of the donkey's neck that I'm doing right here. I'm using a dark violet for this and making sure that the length is all about the same, but the direction is now more vertical. And because of gravity, the end of the strands are going to kind of curve down a little bit and overlap. Now moving on, I'm going to add that next top layer over top the base on the bangs, this adorable little fringe of the donkey. And here I've added a similar color that I used for the base, but added more yellow ochre and some oranges to it. It was also my plan to emphasize this part of the donkey, making this fringe stand out very much so, and it gives a little bit more humor to this piece. Now, because I can use any color to represent the highlights from that upper right light source, as long as it's only just slightly lighter than the bottom layer, I just kept going with that color from the bangs all the way down along the jaw. Now I took a break and moved on to getting another medium to light value. I'm doing that right now with a finer brush on the top back of the neck. This is that violet from my core colors, just with a little bit more white added to it. And with that blue, I could just use that blue in with the light violet and work down, but not too far down, because I want to keep that bottom area a dark value. It's in this layer that we especially want to use our finer brushes and be even more careful about the length, the width, and the direction, because our mistakes are more obvious with these top layers and because we're using lighter colors here. But here's the thing, the secret is not to go too light with these light values. They still want to be more medium to light in value. Only do I add pops of a very light pink and light oranges at the very end, where there's wide gaps in between. It's almost just like there's just little bits of splattered paint on the donkey that just adds a little bit more of that abstract flavor to it. Notice I keep going back to my core colors, not only to fix up mistakes, but also just to keep this donkey more blue, violet, and color. So now I'm on to the next layer, and you can see this has just a little bit more white that I've added to the violet. Now you can see right here, there is this really dark dip behind the donkey's ears to the right of the donkey's eye. And you don't want to have these big, strong, bold, dark blocks or these strips, these areas of very dark values or very light values that look out of place. You want to join them with medium values. So again, for those areas, go back to your core colors. You may need to mix up some similar values to get that right medium value that fits there. And guess what? The lines themselves, this technique of adding clusters of lines to create that fur texture, also helps to break up those wide gaps that really look confusing. But as you add layer after layer, that does slightly get lighter. Like I said, your fur strands are really obvious, so you want to be sure that your brushes are thin with paint and it's not collecting all this sticky dry paint that's making your lines so much thicker. That is another key point to this technique, is just really controlling the moisture on your brush so that each line is not getting thicker and more sloppy. You want to have them about the same width. The length will change, the direction changes based off where you're painting, but for the most part, each strand should be about the same width. So here, going yet another layer, a little bit lighter, and I added pink this time. Now another key point that I actually haven't talked a whole lot about, that I actually only recently realized that I was doing with this technique, is you want to think about the analogous colors. So those are colors that are right next to each other on the color wheel. So pink and purple, blue and green, yellow and orange. That's what I'm thinking about when adding these vivid accents, these hints of color on those top layers. I don't really want to mix a green with a purple. I don't really want to mix a orange with a dark blue. Those are just going to create those muddy colors. That's pretty okay at the beginning with the base, but not here when we're trying to create a light value and vivid, bright pops of color. So I'm adding even more white and more fluorescent pink, another layer that's just a little bit lighter than the bottom one. But do you notice that I'm really not trying to go and cover up all those layers that we've added? I'm placing some pinks over top lines I've already created, but creating even more lines. This creates that thickness. This also creates that dimension. Now this is a process. You're going to make mistakes. You will likely go too light in some areas. But again, please go back to your core colors, cover them up with those medium and dark values like I'm doing right now, let that area dry, and then try again. It's completely normal to have to work backwards sometimes. I've noticed that actually helps to enrich the painting. A lot of times when I get to this point in the painting, I'm no longer looking at the reference. This is that scary but also still freeing process where I'm just seeing what medium values are needed and with what color. I go in with turquoise, and that really helped to join those purples with a lot of those pinks and oranges. Sometimes that one color is all that's needed to complete a piece. Now, when I get to the point where I know I'm nearly finished, the thing I love to do is add just tiny, tiny accents of color for the fur using light pinks or light yellows or light turquoise, but with really large gaps in between. It's almost like 1 or 2 strands get highlighted in one area, or 2 or 3 strands get highlighted in another. It's wherever that light source is hitting that animal, but just tiny little powerful accents that go a long way. All right, creatives, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Be sure to like and subscribe if this helped you. I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye.